So over the last few weeks, my office has received several complaints over the governor's emergency declarations that have banned all commercial traffic, including trucks and buses on interstate. So I've heard from many businesses who expressed it's really been a logistical nightmare for them, that it's also created some significant costs for them. In January, there was a declaration that banned commercial vehicles on interstates and state roads. It started at noon. You know, snow didn't start until much later after that. These shutdowns are happening with a few inches of snow, and recognizing that public safety is very important, but I represent a district that borders Maryland, and that's posing some great challenges. We don't see those kinds of things happening there. So I had trucks that were forced to delay their deliveries over 24 hours to many businesses and factories in the 28th district. And we are a transportation hub. We're the Keystone State for a reason, right? Everything has to cross Pennsylvania to get up and down the East Coast. And much of the traffic out west comes through Pennsylvania as well. We're also the snack food capital of the world, right? So we had trucks of potatoes that couldn't be delivered, which means the chips that we all love to eat weren't being made. So can you walk us through the process of what determines these commercial vehicle restrictions? You know, is there a forecasted snowfall amount that determines, you know, what action is taken? I'm hearing that this is a relatively new policy, or that the threshold has been drastically lowered from prior administrations. So has there been a change in policy for declaring these emergencies?
Thank you for your question. And if I can provide some additional context, when we take a look at this, we go back to, and I'm sure many of you are aware of, in 2007, the Valentine's Day incident where we actually shut down 78 and 81. In 2016, we actually had the snowstorm Jonas on the turnpike that resulted in multiple travelers stranded for multiple hours, hundreds of travelers. We have had incidents like that since then that haven't garnered as much media attention, but even last year in March of 2018, we had an incident in the Northeast because of a significant snowstorm, which stranded travelers for 10, 12, 14, sometimes in some cases 16 hours on the interstate. And as you alluded to, Pennsylvania is the Keystone State. And one of the challenges that we've seen working with the other state agencies, and really these decisions aren't made in a vacuum. So we really work with Pennsylvania State Police, we work with PennDOT, and we also work with the Turnpike Commission to be able to take a look at these. One thing that's been very clear, after 2016, we met as a group of state agencies to come up with what we call the State Highway Closure Framework. That framework was in direct response to what occurred on the Turnpike and some of the other areas where people were stranded for long periods of time. A lot of good work came out of that. We took a look at delineating responsibilities amongst the state agencies. We rely a lot on the local responders, and when we have people stuck on the roadways, to be able to go out and support them and conduct health and safety checks and make sure that their well-being is taken care of, because we may or may not, in the middle of a snow event, be able to evacuate them off the roadway, and that may not be necessarily the best course of action. But sheltering them in place requires manpower, and it requires local manpower, and as we've heard, a lot of times the volunteers are smaller in number, and it creates a lot of challenges. So even with our best attempt after 2016 to be able to address this with quick clearance, to be able to get the roadway open, to be able to release the trapped queue of passenger vehicles that are stuck on the roadway, we still continue to experience incidents where we've trapped motorists on the roadway for significant hours. And at one point, it becomes a huge inconvenience, which we understand. But at certain points, it becomes a true life safety threat for these people. And we've seen that transition to a life safety issue. So we know of people in the Northeast last year in March, one individual on Interstate 84 had a medical emergency and succumbed and died because of that. There were heroic efforts from the local emergency responders and Pennsylvania State Police to be able to evacuate that person and try to get them to care. But unfortunately, even their best efforts did not result in a successful outcome in that case. case. We know of another instance where a baby was born in the trap queue. We know that 911 centers get inundated with calls the longer the people are stuck out there on the roadway, because people are transiting and they have children with special health care needs. They have elderly folks that have special health care needs. There's diabetics that need food, those types of things. So even despite our best efforts to be able to consolidate what we do across the state agencies and prevent this, or essentially respond to it and open the trap queue to be able to get those people off the roadway, we still had these incidents occurring. It was very clear from our agency's perspective and the other agencies that were charged with this, that the governor's office made it very clear that we need to switch to more of a preventative strategy when it comes to this. And this is the result that we're seeing right now, is the preventative strategy. If we can prevent these incidents from occurring, because even when the roadways were closed for 12, 14, 16 hours, the commercial vehicles were still impacted. They weren't moving. In a lot of cases, we would have wreckers move them, and they would go down the road 2 more miles and then get stuck 2 more miles and create more problems. So we've taken a preventative strategy by being proactive and trying to limit and using some of the data that we have to drive that decision making. We're maturing that process significantly as we go. Yesterday's example was a classic example in response to a lot of the concerns of we're banning or restricting commercial vehicles on the roadway because or before, well in advance of the snow getting there. So yesterday, with the sequenced or phased approach, we were probably about 2 hours too late in the situation, and we had a number of commercial vehicles that caused challenges or were involved in incidents along the roadway that closed Interstate 83, Interstate 78, and they were short-term closures, which was good, but we're seeing that. So it's a maturing process right now. We understand there's a huge impact to the industry, but we're really looking at it from a preventing the life safety side of the situation that occurs out there, and we've seen it time and time again. So we've worked proactively with the industry. We've actually met recently at the Turnpike Commission with an advisory committee to be able to sit down and kind of discuss this, and they actually put a working group together to provide us recommendations from a state agency perspective. And we don't, unfortunately, have a crystal ball to be able to get this right all the time, but we're constantly looking at that. The key from our perspective is being very flexible and nimble, that when we roll these on and roll these off, we understand time is money in a lot of these situations, so we try to take them off as soon as possible. There are situations where we forecasted putting them on, the forecast did not pan out, and we actually rolled them back before they were ever designed to go on. So we're doing our due diligence to try and manage that as effectively as possible amongst all the state agencies that are involved.
I would appreciate the constant refinement of the process, because, as I've said, it's really caused significant costs and issues for many businesses in southern New York County, and I think probably in other parts of the state as well. And of course, safety is always very important, and the safety of our first responders as well. So I would appreciate that, and if possible, would appreciate having the opportunity to review that policy that you've put in place.
Sure, and we're in the process of finalizing that right now, and we will socialize that as soon as we have it finalized, and we plan to get that out actually to everybody else. There's no one threshold that we use. It's really a complexity analysis, taking a look at, back in January is a classic example, when we had temperatures that were going to be in the -20s and -30s, the wind chills, we had no ability in that situation to shelter in place anybody on the roadway. We're going to significantly compromise them. So that was a much different decision-making process than what we used yesterday, if that makes sense.
Thank you.